But we'd rather that didn't happen, so we want to pre-screen our buyers very carefully. And I do suggest you use a script of questions so that you're careful to remember all the right questions. And by the way, the program that I'm going to make available here at the end of this presentation includes that script. Next thing is to assign the deal. We're going to use the assignment of contract. That is the method by which we're going to flip this house to our rehabber buyer. Now, when we use the assignment of contract, and again, there's an example of that in my system, we want to get the largest earnest money deposit we can from our buyer. We sell differently than we buy. When we tied this house up with the purchase and sale agreement with the seller, we gave them the smallest earnest money deposit we possibly could. But now we're talking about selling it here, and we're going to collect an earnest money deposit from our buyer that will be notated in the assignment of contract, and that is non-refundable. So the idea here is to collect a whole bunch more from your buyer than you gave to your seller, just in case your buyer flakes out, because then they don't get their money back. And if you can't get an extension, you don't get an opportunity to find another buyer, and you lose your earnest money deposit, well, what you made on the deal was the difference between what you lost and what you collected. So if you give the seller 100 and you collect 1,000 or 2 or 5 from your buyer, you're still well ahead of the game if your buyer flakes out. Now, your buyer may say, well, I'm not going to give you a big non-refundable deposit because, I mean, after all, what if there's a title problem and we can't close? Well, that's when you whip out the letter from the title company I mentioned a minute ago that says that based on their preliminary title search dated 2 days ago, the property or the title is clear and marketable. That should dispel any fear on the part of your buyer of putting up a larger earnest money deposit because of the possibility of a title problem. You've already done your homework. Now you're presenting yourself as the preeminent professional, and that's real important. So we want to get this thing sold as quickly as possible. We're going to do that with the assignment of contract. Your buyer literally goes to the closing and buys the house from your seller. You receive the difference, which is what is in your assignment agreement. Now you collect some of it now in non-refundable deposit and the balance of it at closing. Again, an example of that assignment of contract is in the system. It's probably the simplest form or document in the business. It is just so brain dead simple. In the process of doing that, the buyer's money will actually be what funds the deal. That's why all you needed was earnest money. Now, whatever's due you at the closing, the title company is going to hold out for you. They will do that for you. You don't even need to go to the closing. There's another example of how you can do this without ever leaving your desk. You don't even need to go to the closing, and I don't recommend you do. Why? Why bother? Your time's better spent doing other stuff, like getting the next deal together. The assignment of contract is another way of explaining that so that you understand it, is where we're literally selling our position to our buyer. Until we assign the agreement to our buyer, we are the buyer and we have the right to buy. And that is a very good place to be because this is a killer deal. When we assign that right to buy to Ricky Rehabber, he's basically paying us to go away. He's buying the contract from us. An old term that was used to describe this is flipping contracts. The assignment of contract is legal, legitimate, and recognized in every state, and is by far and away the simplest way to wholesale properties because you don't take title. You're not in the chain of title, and there's no funding involved. Your buyer comes to the closing table with the money that your seller gets. You get the difference between what you agreed to pay for it and what your buyer is willing to pay for it. There is the essence of the assignment. It's so simple. The system explains that in great detail because obviously I have a very limited amount of time here that I'm burning through where my system takes more time to really explain that in great detail. Okay, how are we going to automate the process with a system? Well, first off, let's use bird dogs. Let's have the bird dogs finding these vacant houses for us. We talked about that. I want 6 photos. I want an approximate square footage so that they can just paste paste the dimensions and length times width equals area. I want obviously the address of the property, and I want a categorization of repairs: bad, really bad, or awful. Let the bird dogs do that. Pay them $5 within, say, this radius on the map, $10 outside of that radius on the map. Remember, divide your map into sections so that you're focusing on section 1, then 2, then 3, and 4, and 5, and 6, and rotate through them because this is a liquid environment. You know, once you've been through, you know, say 10 sections of your town, start over back at 1 because there are vacant houses in that area, again, that weren't vacant before. That's an important thing to keep in mind. Use findtheseller.com to locate those sellers. Why spend all that time talking to neighbors and all that? Let's automate this. Get the bird dog to bring us the lead. Turn the lead information over to find the seller. Get the seller's information, and you know, do that all from your desk. You only need to work with a few buyers. You'll generate a list of perhaps many interested parties, but what will happen is, as you start to make your deals available to them, the cream will rise to the top. Now, one suggestion is if you have an email list, and most of you are email friendly, I'm sure, you can have a list of email recipients that you can send a message to just, you know, with one click. And so if you have a list of wholesale buyers and you have a new deal under contract, by the way, don't tell your wholesale buyers about any deals until you have them under contract. Just don't do that. No matter how honest they are, it's like leaving your gold Rolex watch on the table, you know, when you head to the men's room or the ladies' room. Don't do it. So when you're only going to need a few of these buyers, and if you have them on an email list, now you've got a new deal. Give them the parameters of the deal. Fire an email at them and put something like, you know, asking price is blank, which is a deep discount. Your asking price should certainly be more than the least you're willing to accept, but low enough to get them excited. And watch what happens. Just one little email and things start hopping. Because I'll tell you, I said it before, when you bring a good deal to the marketplace, it does not remain available for long. Don't get greedy. That's the whole point. Leave enough on the table for the next guy. Don't get greedy. Cash checks often and then repeat. So you decide how often you want to do this. You decide, you know, if this is something you're going to do 1 or 2 times a month, or maybe it's something that's going to be a full-time business for you and do it 8 or 10 times a month. Your average net income on one of these deals should not ever be less than 5% of the after repair value. There's a very useful rule of thumb for you. Your profit margin, your net profit, should always be at least 5% of the after repair value. So you're talking 10 grand on a $200,000 house, you're talking 25 grand on a $500,000 house. That's a good rule of thumb to use. Okay, so as far as findtheseller.com is concerned, how many of our searches will you use? Well, that depends. It depends on you know, how many vacant houses are being presented to you by your bird dogs or how many you're drumming up on your own. I would think that if you're going to do this even on a part-time basis, you could expect to analyze maybe 20, figure between 10 and 20 vacant houses for every one deal you do. So if a bird dog brings you 20 leads, they cost you $5 a piece, and maybe you skip trace half of them because half of them you rule out, you don't like what you see or whatever. You skip trace half of them, that yields one deal. Now you've got a few $100 invested between the bird dog and our services. You could easily go through 10 searches a month or more, and that's just to do one deal a month. So, you know, it's a numbers game. Remember that this is a numbers game.